Hello, campers. I am here with lovely Nicole Galland, who has going to be kind enough to talk to us about her new novel, Iago, which I would strenuously urge you to go out and buy, and not just get at the library, because, as I remind you all the time, living authors really do need you to buy their books.
Yes, thank you.
And I'm particularly thrilled about this because this book is something I know a lot of you are trying to do, where you're trying to take classic stories and you're trying to update them. And this is such a clever way of doing it. Yes. And it's well written too, which is very nice because, as we all know, that isn't necessarily the case when this is done. And I wanted to talk about that. How did you decide who was going to be your main character?
Oh, Iago informed me. That was. I knew that I wanted to write about the play because I have a theater troupe. We do condensed versions of Shakespeare. We adapt them and then we do them as staged readings. And when we were doing Othello, I got so immersed in the story in general, but particularly the character of Iago, because the actor playing the part showed up and didn't know the play. And we had decided that we really wanted him to play the part. And then he said, "Oh, I'd love to play Iago." And then he showed up and said, "I haven't had a chance to look at the script yet." And I said, "That's okay. It's basically the original, just shorter." And he said, "No, I mean, I haven't read Othello."
Oh,
and I got this panicked feeling. And I said, "Well, what? Okay, why did you say you wanted to play the part if you don't know the part?" And he said, "Well, every actor I know wants to play this part.
Oh, I can believe that.
So there's got to be a reason. I just don't know what it is." So we stayed up until 2 a.m. researching it. We read through it together. We talked about it. We picked it apart. And so he and I kind of got churned up about it. Mm-hmm. And then we did it. And then it was over. But we really had only scratched the surface. And he went on. He still wants to play the part. And I hope he can, like in a full production. Ours was just a staged reading. And there's no way that I'll ever get to play the part. Yeah. So my desire to create the character was started by that process. Mm-hmm. And I realized that the only way, I thought, I need to direct it for real, but I didn't actually, because really all I was interested in was Iago.
Oh, so the character came in and took you by the throat.
Yeah, well, pretty well. That's kind of
actually for this play. I probably shouldn't put it that way, but maybe I should. One of the things I love about this book is that Othello is not the jealous one.
Oh, that's interesting.
Iago is. And so he's taking an emotion that he feels so intensely and increasingly so, and he's applying it to this other character. And I love that.
That's a good point.
And it's actually foreign to Othello.
Right, it is. Can I tell you something very strange? I just suddenly thought of, this is going to seem like an absolute tangent. When I was in high school, I was in The Crucible by Arthur Miller, which completely coincidentally is where there's an opening quote from that, but that's not why I suddenly thought of this. And I was playing Abigail Williams, who's the leader, the ringleader of the girls. And this was my first method acting role, and I took it very, very seriously, and I was totally committed to everything that she was doing, and I believed in what she was doing totally, utterly. So in the middle of the run, someone who worked at the high school where I was going, at the Martha's Vineyard Regional High School, came up to me in the hallway and said, "We saw the show last night. You were fabulous. We hated you so much." and my reaction was, I wasn't bad. What do you? So just the reason I just thought of that is because just now when you said, "So Iago's the jealous one," I had this impulse on Iago's behalf to say, "No, he's not."
Which is exactly what he would say. Right. It's so fascinating, and I think this is so seldom done well when you have a first-person narrative of someone who is losing his mind, and he's not aware of it. Right. And usually, I read a lot of manuscripts, and very often is, beat the reader over the head with it. "Oh, I'm going to go and kill somebody now." But here there were just these tiny, little, incremental steps. And since the reader has been going along with all the incremental steps, when he starts to get unreasonable, you say, "Oh, I actually heard my brain say, oh, I'm going to excuse him being jealous of his wife this one time."
Right,
And then a few pages later, I was like, wait a minute.
Right.
He's a little bit crazy.
Oh, good. That was the goal. The goal was that you you go along for the ride. You get invested in going along for the ride with him. Yeah. And at a certain point, it's almost like the reader's responsibility to say, I don't care that we've been going along on this ride together. You've now crossed the line, and I'm going to watch you, but I'm not going to follow anymore. Oh my God, I wish you wouldn't go there. But yeah, there's a kind of responsibility I think that I give the reader too.
Yes, I love how implicated I felt in this. I felt
That's good. That's
so
good.
guilty at the end because I felt as though I should be doing something, that there was a point at which I could have said no. Which, as a reader, of course, I couldn't.
Right.
You could have.
Well, that's interesting because one of the things that makes Iago work so great as a character in the theater is that ideally, we have murderous trees.
Yes, we are being attacked by bugs.
Ideally, a situation is created where the audience in a theater wants to call out to Othello, he's lying!
Yes,
Don't believe
exactly.
him! But they never do because that would break a convention that you just don't do that.
Yeah, you don't hiss.
Although you wonder, like, if in Shakespeare's day, when there was so much interactivity between the actors and the audience, if the play wasn't frequently sabotaged by...
That's interesting.
I have no idea. I have no idea.
Stage.
But it's that similar thing where you sort of want... The impulse is to want to intervene.
Yes, and I felt that very strongly in this book. As my readers know, I am someone who... It's very difficult for me to get involved in a plot now because I read so many books and I read so many manuscripts so many times as an editor. And when I get mad enough at a book to throw it across the room... the other thing I should show you. See this bit up here? I could not put it down and I took it into the bathtub. That's how engaging this is.
Honored.
I was towards the end. I was like, no, I have to get ready to go, and I really okay, I'll take it in his bathtub, and of course I dropped it, which is why I have hope that the Kindle will never take over completely, because I would have died. But I got so absorbed in this that I kept starting to throw it across the room, which is a very high sign of praise for me, because I wanted to stop him, but there was nothing I could do. And I love that he was self-aware. And I don't want to give too much away because I want you to read the book, if I haven't made that clear.
Thank you.
But he was aware enough of his own progressive insanity that he tries to talk himself out of it at a couple of points. And
he tries to justify it, I think. That's how I would describe it.
But there's one point, and again, I don't want to give too much away, but where even he can't believe what he's done. And he justifies it, and then his mind goes back. And he justifies it, and his mind goes back. And it's just masterful writing, I think.
Thank you.
How do you know, though, so my readers who are trying to do something similar, how do you know when enough is enough? Especially with a story that a lot of readers are already going to know, basically.
It's very, it's very intuitive. I mean, on a certain level, it's very intuitive. And I think that because it's based on a piece of drama, and I have a theater background, a lot of it is my imagining how it would feel to be literally playing the part. Like, if I was doing this, could I do it and believe it? Like... If I was really doing this, or if I was directing it, or if I was directing the play. If this was a play and I was directing it, would I be buying what that actor is doing? But I don't know if it's that much of a direct translation into theater. But it's definitely at a certain point, it's a gut level thing.
Interesting.
I wish that I could make it more technical than that.
No, I get that. I get that where you have a visceral response.
Yeah.
Do you think you developed that visceral response over time as an actor?
Probably.
Or as a writer?
I think when I think of the history of my life, even though I started writing when I was a little kid, the thing that I did in the world more in a variety of different manifestations was theater. I acted, I directed, I taught, I was in an improv group, I was a dramaturg, I was a literary manager. I was in graduate school for directing, but I was acting in all of my friends' shows. Yeah. So I just had an opportunity. I was always in the process of creating theater, which is unlike writing. Theater, you get instant feedback.
Oh, I suppose that's true.
You know what I'm saying? You get right away. You know, not only can you sense from the other actors, but your director will say if it's working or not. Your audience will tell you if it's working or not.
I can feel you guys getting jealous at this point. You're writing because you would love to have me there.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it's like having your own immediate editor right there that's outside of yourself, but that is part of the process with you. So I never thought of it that way, but in many ways, it's like I am my own audience. It's like I'm having a little. I have my ideal theater life in my head when I'm writing a book. I never really thought of it that way, Anne. That's funny.
Really interesting. Something that I have been known to do occasionally is do you ever have your actor kid act out scenes for you to see if they're going to work?
No, I should do that.
I have been known to do that. Unfortunately, it's usually something that's physically difficult. Well, what happens if you attack him over the bench? Will you both break your legs, or will just one of you? So it does take a bit of blandishment, but I
think I'm too much of a control freak to do that. Yeah, although I have had, when there's fight scenes, generally speaking, I have had, especially, like, not so much in this book, there's not really that much fighting in this book, but my previous novel, Crossed, which is about the Fourth Crusade, a friend of mine who is an Aikido, oh, thank you,
that was a motorcycle going by.
A friend of mine who is an Aikido sensei, I gave him the manuscript, and he read through all of the fight stuff and sort of vetted it for me. Yeah,
this is really interesting. It's something you might want to think about doing. Actually, I see manuscripts all the time where clearly no one's thought about whether it's physically possible to do something. Right. And that's especially true in fantasy novels, I think, where even though there's gravity, the author is not necessarily taking into account
that there's gravity. Sure. Yeah.
Another thing that I would imagine that a theater background is very helpful with is figuring out how much a speaker can say in a breath.
That's a good point. I never thought of that either, but I probably do that without even realizing it.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed this here a lot because, especially your fight scenes, your verbal fight scenes are especially wonderful, I think, because they feel very real because people are short of breath when they're fighting, and we would be saying, there's another motorcycle, we would be saying much, much shorter sentences if we were fighting.
That's really, I never thought about that consciously.
And so one of the things my readers know this, I will always say, you have to read your manuscript out loud, especially the dialogue.
I do that. That I do all the time.
And there's just no other way to find out certain things.
I definitely do that. If I was less of a control freak, I would have somebody else read it out loud for me, but I'm too much of a control freak, so I do it myself.
Well, how do you get around the tone issue? Because I notice when I read things out loud, I'll occasionally supply the tone I want, especially in a first-person narrative. I'll occasionally supply with tone what I really should be saying in writing, and I won't necessarily realize it if I'm reading it out loud.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that's another thing that I think is just intuitive. I don't have the solution to that. The best way to guard against that would be to let somebody else read it, but I'm just too much of a control freak.
I think that's a very common type of
I am a part of a small writers group. And one of the other women is a first-time writer. She's writing this wonderful young adult coming-of-age novel, and I read hers. I'm the only person in the group that has performing experience. Oh, so I'm very comfortable with cold readings. But I think that it's helpful for her to hear a voice other than her own voice, and I'm sort of envious of her that she allows me to do that because I won't allow anyone else to do it. I just can't. Even though
I see that.
In fact, I think I would love this to become a book on tape.
Yes.
But then I think it would be hard for me to listen to it. But maybe not. I don't know.
Oh.
I don't know, because if it's not... That's one of the reasons I had to stop directing professionally, because I would go ballistic internally. If, like, we would rehearse a scene and we'd get it just the way I wanted it to. But then, actors have to make it their own.
Yes, exactly.
And so every time I would go to see a show that I was directing, I would pace behind the audience, back and forth, pacing, because, oh, God, we worked so hard and you didn't do it the way I wanted you to. That's when I realized I really shouldn't be a theater director, because I love actors and I want them to be free to embody what they're doing.
Yes.
And when I'm acting, I want to be able to do that. But it was really hard for me to yield control. So
that's really interesting.
So my options were to become a film director or a writer, and I chose writer.
May I ask why?
Because I'd always been doing it. I just had never shown it to anyone.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. In fact, freshman year of college, I showed my boyfriend, with whom I was in the process of breaking up at the time, like we were just going to be friends. I showed him an excerpt of something I'd written in high school, and he read it and he was an English major and I wasn't, and he was very snarky and condescending and down-putting about it. And it was hugely significant to me about 6 or 7 years later when we had reconnected and become friends. Mm-hmm. And he said very casually, like it was a given, "You are such a terrific writer." And I realized that like I'd been holding on for years to his negative feedback. And that's why I would never have allowed anyone to see anything I wrote. And he was talking about my letters, that we had started a correspondence.
Oh, interesting.
But like I needed permission from him, which is ridiculous. You should never let someone have that kind of power over you. But I did.
And so many writers do that.
Yeah. So the minute that he said that I was a good writer, then I was allowed to think of myself as a good writer. I'm not recommending that anyone function that way. That's my sad story.
No, I get that. And I know so many writers for whom that's the case, where, oh, it's just something I do as a hobby. And then some pro or someone you really respect says, oh, this is really good. And you say, oh, maybe I have some talent.
Yeah.
And you're not actually more talented than you were 35 seconds before.
Right.
But you feel that way.
You validated in some way.
I think a lot of people feel like that about getting an agent. That you're not a real writer till you have an agent, or you're not a real writer till you have a book published, which I think anybody who has published knows neither of those things are true
at all. That is just not true. Yeah.
And one of the things that I really love about knowing so many writers is that I do know people who are at all levels of writing, and nothing will cure you faster of thinking, oh, only the published people are any good, than knowing a broad range of writers. Yeah. And I've completely lost my train of thought, but we'll and we'll pick it up again. We had...
I'm cutting. You go that way.